Welcome. Today, we want to explain why it is important to calculate the heating load as accurately as possible, and how we can use approximate methods to estimate it as realistically as possible. The heating load is the amount of energy a building needs to stay warm at a location-dependent cold temperature, the standard outside temperature. It should not be confused with the results of energy performance certificates or thermal insulation certificates, which specify kilowatt hours, i.e., the annual requirement. This heating load is important for selecting the right heat pump. The heat pump, including any additional power that may be required, must be able to deliver this power at the standard outside temperature. If the heating load is assumed to be too low, it will not get warm. However, if you err on the side of caution and assume too high a heating load, this also leads to significant disadvantages. It will naturally be more expensive. The property may no longer be sufficient for the ground source. Larger heat pumps are louder, and the operating costs may also be higher. Operating costs rise because the device switches on and off more frequently. Power-controlled heat pumps minimize the risk of missizing somewhat, but the risk remains. Without an exact heating load, future costs can only be predicted inaccurately, and legal disputes may arise. Therefore, an exact heating load calculation, according to DIN N 12831, is a good approach, but unfortunately, it is time-consuming, and some information is difficult to obtain. For each component, you have to obtain the surface areas and the so-called U value, a measure of thermal insulation. This is often difficult, especially in older houses. You cannot tell a house's heating load just by looking at it. For initial considerations and indicative price quotes, it is therefore common practice to work with estimates. There are numerous tools online that work on two principles. Either the living space is multiplied by a value, or the previous consumption is divided by a fixed number, like full load hours. If this fixed number is not adjusted to the location and boundary conditions, like heating limit temperature, the results can be very inaccurate in some cases. For this reason, we have decided to integrate a calculation function for heating load estimation into our heat pump tools. There are various ways of doing this, via the year of construction, from consumption using the location, or via kilowatt hours measured or taken from certificates. For all variants, this recalculation function can be accessed either via the design or via the house data button. The calculation based on the year of construction is self-explanatory. Simply enter the suggested typical specific heating load for the building category. This method is useful if there have been no significant thermal improvements, such as external wall or roof insulation, since the building was constructed. In order to be able to calculate backwards from consumption, some preparatory entries are necessary: boiler efficiency, location, and standard outside temperature. You also need room temperature, heating limit temperature, and gains. This sequence is important so the software can correctly assign the boundary conditions. The boiler efficiency can be set in the options before opening the project. A typical value is already stored. All other values can be entered in the house data. Afterwards, the consumption can be stored using the approximate calculation button, including whether hot water preparation is included. The internal recalculation uses the specific climate data for the location. This method is useful if there are no additional energy sources like fireplaces. If there is consumption via a heat meter, you can use the recalculation function on the house data page. First, enter all default settings before using the Convert button. For figures from thermal insulation certificates, set the standardized values first, like 9 degrees heating limit, and only switch to your specific location after the estimate. Use the approximate heating load to check quotations or forecast operating costs. Thank you for your attention, and see you again in our other videos.